Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you very much for joining today's course. Going to try and share my screen. Please let me know what you see in the chat. Do you see everything? Do you see my next slide as well, or do you see the presenter mode? Okay, I should not show you the presenter mode, so I didn't make any notes, so I'm just going to change it. Just show like normal. Now, can you see it all right? Cool. Hey, so many places. Chicago, Madrid. Perfect. Are we ready to go? I think it's time. Brussels as well. Cool. So thank you very much for joining today's TranslaStars course of Continuous Localization meets AI workflows for the future. My name is István Lengyel and I'm going to be the instructor today. Uh, I'm always very, very interested in who you are, but maybe before we go into that, I would like to say a couple of words about myself. So I'm originally Hungarian, but I've been living in Spain, near Barcelona for the last 10 years. Um, by training, I'm an economist, a translator, and an interpreter. And I actually started translating in 97, and I was busy translating mostly books. Uh, Be Lazy is my third venture. The first company I started when I thought that it's very easy to start a company. This was in 2001. It was an automated translation company. It was a big flop. My second company was much less of a flop. I was one of the co-founders of MemoQ, and I was very active behind like the product design of MemoQ as well. And I filled a number of roles until 2016 when I left the company. So, and Be Lazy is my third venture. And Be Lazy was brought to life because this continuous localization, even after MemoQ was like becoming successful, it was still not something that was working. And for me, this kind of like seamless processes that are involving humans are very much key. So that's pretty much my dream. Uh, I mean, I have a lot of interests. I'm one of the generalists probably. Uh, it's like I wrote, for example, my PhD in translation studies about quality management. But as a matter of fact, like I'm pretty much a process-oriented person, and like I look at everything as a challenge. So I would love to learn a little bit about yourselves. I am very happy to open the floor for like somebody if they want to introduce themselves. But before we go into that, maybe there is a couple of things that you could share, which is like, I know it's not very personal. It would be great to sit down and, just have a little conversation, a powwow. But like, what's your current work? Where is your background? Um, I don't know if it's, yeah, because you cannot speak at the moment, and I'm not even sure like how to make everyone be able to speak at the time. I would like to explain a little bit why I was thinking about it. Continuous localizations is very much about operations. It's very much about operationalizing your language strategy. I know that some of you are working at an enterprise, others are working at translation companies, others are translators. Uh, if you are, like doing a non-translation like but freelance work, then please select other linguistic work, or if you're into quality management and things like that. And if you're working in other areas, then please select not operations related. For example, if you're working in sales or in sales or marketing. I mean, vendor management for me is operations. I see that continuous localization projects, you've already answered. Okay, I will stop explaining because like now 90% of you have answered. And what I see is that the majority of you have never used business management systems. That is very interesting, because then obviously I will need to make a point of explaining what these are for, but you will see that. And what I would like to ask you is that you are sharing if something is unclear, because obviously I don't know where you're exactly coming from, what is your background. If something is unclear, please don't hesitate to stop me. I will try to speak in a logical way, but obviously I cannot guarantee that I am able to meet with everybody's thoughts. So I will be monitoring the chat. And if anything is unclear, please stop me at all times. And I see that I will share the results with you while I'm also reviewing it myself. I see many of you are project managers, somewhat less translators, and many managers. Uh, Interestingly, many of you have done continuous localization projects, and only 4 of you are asking what is such a project. We are going to cover it. But it's good to know that it's something to cover. And most of you have not used, or you don't know if you have worked with business management systems. And then there are the special interests, special requests, which is opening for me on the screen. So give me a second until it. Oh my God. So the thing is that I would need to log into Zoom to see those. May I ask you, 9 of you have written a special interest or special request, and I use this short answer, but I don't have access because I logged into Zoom through the course management material, so I'm not able to log in with the username and password here. Would you mind sharing it in the webinar chat, the special interest or a special request, or what brought you here? I'm so sorry to have you type this. The session recording are for review later, as far as I understand. AO has raised the hand, and I made you a speaker. So please feel free to speak if there is anything. Okay, so what I'm seeing is that you're much into AI here. We are going to speak about AI, but not only that. So if AO wants to speak, you can. Otherwise, we'll continue. Oh, you've been away from the industry, Valerie. Very interesting. Okay, leveraging AI in the localization workflow. All right, excellent. I've got some of those thoughts. So going back here, what is continuous localization? I hope that you are seeing my screen with the right slides. Yes. So the continuous localization is something which is not new. I've seen the first few examples about 20 years ago, and continuous localization is about using technology to deliver content in many languages in the least amount of time without breaking the chain with full automation, except maybe yes, maybe no, of the linguistic part. So if you're a translator, what's the idea is that the content gets to you for translation without hesitation, and you within a couple of, depends how long you are going to deliver this content back into the systems, and the systems are going to show that. I mean, continuous localization is what a lot of different companies like Uber, Spotify, Amazon, others are doing. But continuous localization is also something that the most extreme example I've ever seen was actually from a Canadian public transport authority, which was obviously working in French and English, and they had to deliver the translations of announcements within 8 minutes. So that was actually the shortest deadline I've ever seen for continuous localization. Technologically, continuous localization is not impossible at all. So the majority of the translation management systems are able to automatically assign a job to someone and are able to work with content integrations. So technologically, this is not a dream. This is a reality, and this has been a reality pre-AI as well. However, organizationally, continuous localization is creating a lot of headaches and bottlenecks. And we are going to talk about these and how to resolve them. And basically, we are going to talk about like the two different aspects that we can address continuous localization today in the age of AI. I would like to start a discussion with you. First of all, does everybody need continuous localization? Does everybody need continuity? Is automated localization process management a goal today for everyone or not? And then the other thing, the other question that I have is whether you think that invisible and scalable operations are equivalent to continuous localization or not. Remy is saying continuous localization is a goal, but is it something which everybody should be pursuing? It's also like the three dots after the goal is interesting. Quality definitely matters. Okay. What I'm hearing here is that quality and speed seems to be like a bit of a clash here in some people's minds. I personally don't think that continuous localization is necessarily a compromise on the quality, because you can have still the same processes. And I mean, very often what happens is that, people have like 1 week of deadline and then 5 days they are waiting, and then the sixth day they start working on it, which is like very often continuous localization has uh, deadlines of 24 or 48 hours even for a short amount of text. So Tamara is saying it depends. It's not always um, the goal. Great. I mean, I must say that I've heard it from some companies uh, that they have the luxury not to need continuous localization. Uh, Recently, I heard it, for example, from a rather well-known antivirus company, so that they can take the time to work on things. Sometimes you also have like releases, and continuous localization is obviously most related to two areas: software localization on the one hand, and on the other hand, website localization. It can also be related to announcement localization and some other topics as well. But obviously, if you are, for example, translating a game, then you only need continuous localization if the updates are rolled out all the time. Okay, so let's continue. And then let's have a look at the continuous localization workflow and why it is not actually continuous. We are going to be impersonating here a software development company. I'm working at Be Lazy, which is a software development company. So I kind of see this. Uh, so let's look at software development. I mean, software development, there are code changes. Code changes are happening all the time. I mean, we have code changes 5 times every day, and we are a small team. Imagine like a large company, and where you have code changes pretty much every 5 minutes. This is truly continuous. There are tools that are handling this. These are called the CI/CD tools. And then there can be automated tools to extract the strings for translation. This is also something that if you've got the agreement on how you are storing strings, these tools are able to extract that. Internationalization is an issue, but it is something that should be solved before the continuous localization starts. Then the next topic is the string freeze, which is when can we send out strings for translations? When are the strings in a good enough state to be sent out? Well, this is an issue sometimes uh, because of the developer English, because of not having the right workflows for the review of the source text, uh, because of I am not sure if it's still going to change. And obviously, many people are procrastinating to the last minute so that they can compensate for their hesitation with very, very short deadlines and things like that. So when there is a string freeze decision, then comes the preparation and the handoff. This is the first thing is content packaging, which is like adding context mostly. I mean, preparing the translation kits is one thing, but I think adding context is very important when you're talking about software, which is something that can happen together with the code changes, or it can actually also happen at a much later stage. What else is there afterwards? The project setup. I mean, these are like understanding what you are sending out, what are the languages to do. Usually, this is coming from agreements beforehand, and the priorities are also there beforehand, but there may be a change in priorities. And then finally, these customers usually work with a translation management system. If it's not their own, it is their main translation companies. But for continuous localization to work, you need to have some sort of a translation management system. And by here, translation management system here, I don't necessarily mean a document-oriented one, such as like XTM, phrase, memo queue, you name it. But it can be a localization-related one, such as phrase strings or localize or transifex, crowding, localize, you name it. And this part is usually automated. What you see is that 3 steps here are automated and 3 steps are not. Let's continue. Now comes the translation supply chain. This is where we are, right? So first of all, we need assignment. I mean, before assignment, you may have some kind of like an acceptance, a formal acceptance or something of the job. But when you have formally accepted it as a language service provider, then you assign the work to available translators. Then the question is whether the translators are available. And this is a matter of organization and vendor management. And this is also a matter of agreements with the customers, because if the customer is always sending to you the jobs on Tuesday at 10 a.m., then you will probably be able to guarantee that some of the translators or the majority of the translators are available on Tuesday at 10 a.m. If the customer is completely sending it whenever they want, well, it's a bit harder. And then comes the bottleneck of the human translation speed. While continuous localization is usually about what some people call microtransactions, so very small translation volumes, Not all of that is like that. There are sometimes, a couple of thousand words translate in a day, maybe in many jobs, maybe not in one. But basically, human translation still needs to be taken into account. Then comes the quality assurance, which is a very important part. Do you do TEP, translation, editing, proofreading? If you do, then obviously the text needs to be reviewed. Then there is like a QA type of a review for accuracy, quality, meeting the style guide, meeting the terminology, and then there can be revision cycles as well, which might take some time. I mean, if you are working with people that you've been working on this project with for a long time, then this is like minimal because they understand the style guide. But when you're onboarding new people, this is a major issue. And finally, there is the integration and the deployment. So we have had the translations done, and then the translations are received back, and then there is like a testing in context, which is today relatively simple. If the layout is correct, the functionality is correct, here you have to think about the placeholders, which are usually represented by tags in the translation tools. You have to think about, for example, the right to left languages, which is like much harder to test, especially if you are not a speaker of one of them. You have to think about different, uh, user interfaces, such as the mobile user interface when you're releasing a website, whether the text length fits there. And while there can be text length restrictions previously added, they are not always there. And then you can also make sure that all the escaped characters, if characters need to be escaped, they are correctly replaced. So that's another thing that is important, so that nothing breaks. Some kind of testing is necessary, especially at the beginning of such a process. Then you are coordinating the release, which is like, when are we actually releasing it? Maybe this is immediate, and then you're deploying it to production, releasing the localization content to the end users, which is an automated function provided by all of the CI/CD pipeline tools, Jenkins, GitLab, all of these. Any questions here or any observations? Okay, now, so then let's talk a little bit about the bottlenecks. So what are the bottlenecks in this process here? Let's first talk about the costs. There are two issues here. You don't want to send out something that is not final because you're afraid that you have to pay for the same thing twice. This is if you're on the buyer side and you're an employee, the easiest way of saving cost is like not sending something twice. Then there is another thing, which is like, shall we send every single string that has changed out? There is a minimum fee often charged, especially by translation companies, but also by translators, which is making a real continuity hard to justify from a financial perspective. And this is where my question in the beginning relating to the business management system was revolving around, because minimum fees is a reality, obviously to avoid mostly the project management overhead, the tracking overhead, the delivery overhead of the work. But most of the TMSs do not handle minimum fees, as you can see on the right side with a spelling error because it was corrected into Spanish, I see. And then finally, the effect of the missing strings is also a bottleneck. This is like, what happens if you want to release, but you don't have one language yet fully translated? Are you going to replace it with some automatically generated translations? Are you leaving it in the original language? Are you waiting and postponing the release just because something didn't come back on time? Is it causing any trouble for the actual software? Is it going to break on this if we don't have one language? What's going to happen there? And from the system perspective, these are the cost bottlenecks because these are things, especially the third one, is something that you can fix with internationalizing the software. So it's not going to break if something is missing. You can have alternative pipelines as well. You can have, for example, first a machine translation and then replace it with human translation. If you do it within 2 days, nobody is going to really care about that. There are several strategies, but something needs to be developed. And this is development that is not offered by the TMSs. This is something that they need to implement in their own system. System bottlenecks are that, and this is an important one, is that if you're a translation company, then your linguist database's main source or your linguist information main source is not your client's TMS. That is everywhere. And this is where business management comes in. Because basically you want to have a single database for evaluating, for understanding, for selecting your vendors, where you can see the vendors' fees, the minimum fees, and so on and so forth. And this is usually a very different system from the client's TMS. The only situation when you got the linguist database within the client's TMS is when you get an agreement on a fixed team of translators with the client, because then obviously you just have to pick from those. Usually you have like 2 or 3 for language, and that's all. Then the other issue is that you need to track the amount of work, and you need to send some purchase orders to the vendors. TMSs normally don't send purchase orders. I mean, this is also something that purchase orders are a regular thing in the industry. In most places, you don't have to be very specific. So, like, there are some countries where there is a legal requirement for sending purchase orders, but it does not have to have the full analysis on it, does not have to have the final fee on it. That is not something that you need to do before, because then a lot of other things, like, for example, software companies would fail. But in this industry, we've got this idea that we need to tell the costs fully upfront, which may be a good thing or a bad thing. But these POs are actually sent from other systems. When you can have agreements to send like a monthly PO at the end of the month, there are ways to work this around. But again, this requires a coordination with the translators. So in other words, the client's TMS is a vendor secondary system always, while it's the primary system for the client. And most TMSs are lacking capabilities to track the minimum fees as well. So let's continue. Let's talk about the translation supply chain. Here we are. This is the most typical supply chain, which can be different because there are, like, the typical suppliers are either translation companies, people contract them because of their scalability, freelance translators. It's more work to work with freelance translators and to manage them, but if you only need 1 or 2, makes perfect sense. Or in-house linguists who you have to fill with work, because otherwise it's a luxury to have an in-house linguist. So in-house linguists can be here, but if you're working with translators, then you are either working as a client directly with the translators or through different translation companies. Now I'm talking about the large buyers of translations who are usually working through translation companies simply because they would not have the capacity to manage so many vendors. So in this case, you've got the client who can have a TMS and who can involve internal developers. Today, we see more and more clients get a TMS. 10 years ago, it was relatively rare, but clients have taken over the technology stack for managing translations. But still, there are some multilingual vendors that are managing translations for their end clients as a managed service. So the large vendors all have their proprietary project cost and vendor management systems and add a layer of complexity. And if you are a single language vendor, you are not only working in the client's TMS, but you are receiving the instructions from your direct customers from the multilingual vendors vendor portal, and you get a link to the client's TMS or you get some files or something. And this is the same with the translator, even though you don't have to go to the multilingual vendors vendor portal. As a translator, you have to go to the single language vendors vendor portal if these 4 different players are in the chain. And you need to work with multiple companies, and you got like a lot of tasks. And the more continuous the localization is, the more easy it is to get lost and simply forget to translate something. So the issue is that everybody here needs to keep a personal log of what is left to do. But on the client side, the TMS is not always giving the capabilities to do that. And we will see why. So what's the outcome? The client buys a TMS. They think we are doing great. We have automated our steps. We are getting the strings going to the TMS. We are getting the website going to the TMS. And we have automated everything. Then they think it's a very good idea to write very long style guides. But they don't think it's a very good idea to make commitments towards the vendors. And this ends up in having some translators work on a one-off basis, working on a €5 job, and they are not going to read the 100-page style guides. And this is an issue. Because obviously the client thinks that everybody is as vested in the process as they are, but they are paid for exactly this client. Whereas the translation companies are working with many clients, the translators are working with many end clients. They need to know a lot of different style guides, and this is complicating things. Then we get to the MLV vendors that are optimizing the workflow on a per client basis. You've got a customer that is spending $1 million, euros whatsoever with you, and then you are investing something in order to make that process efficient. But what happens is that they are building their own pipelines, their own workflows. And when the client is changing the vendors, then the entire supply chain gets changed. Doesn't mean that it's going to be going to different final translators. You have situations when, Lionbridge or RWS are working on a customer, but in the end, the Icelandic translator is going to be the same. But what happens is that the workflow changes. How you are working changes completely. So for the clients, changing their MLVs is actually a big, big, big risk. Then we've got the issue that the price is obviously going down rather than up on the supply chain. From an economical perspective, this is very normal. But the problem is that, as we saw in the previous slide here, a single language vendor actually has to do double administration or triple administration because they need to go into the multilingual vendors vendor portal in order to take the job. They might need to go into the client's TMS to reassign the job. And they also need to keep a log in their own system that these are jobs that we are working on. The translator does not necessarily need to keep a log if they are like they are believing the customers, but most translators, let's face reality, are kind of rather going for the safe topic, and they are still keeping a log. And basically that's the outcome. So the issue is that if you have to do more systems, then obviously the cost of administration, the cost of project management is growing as you go down, but the word rates are going down. The funny thing is that the PM percentage is charged at the MLVs, but the MLVs actually have the least problems with the project management in this supply chain. because they don't need to register, so many projects. They just register a project for many, many languages, usually with an automation, and then that's it. Uh, but the smaller players are not getting the same amount of support. And the thing is that registering a one language project is not much easier, let's face it, than registering a two, three, four languages project. Um, so what is happening is that the projects under 10 euros are hard to make economic sense of. Uh, I have the impression that there is no company that is able to make a profit on projects that are under 10 euros, simply because of this registration need. And while before COVID, uh, you could still hire people in low paid countries, I don't think that's really the reality anymore. The salaries have gone up, the translation fees did not, and it's hard to make economic sense of this. Most companies are taking these tiny projects in order to also be awarded the larger projects. So that's how they are making some sense of it. And MLVs, multilingual vendors, they are adding these extra layers of management, but they do not know the complications that they create by having all of them having their own different business management systems, because that is adding more systems to manage downstream. Any comments, any ideas, any questions here? So what I would say here is that if you got a translation assignment, translation job, that's a transaction. You receive it, you work on that, 10,000 words, you've got 3 weeks, 4 weeks to deliver that, perfect. But continuous localization is a relationship. And this is something that very few people notice, that in the case of continuous localization, you have teams, and those teams are working with you. And you cannot really look at it from a project perspective. You need to look at it from a relationship perspective. And continuous localization, because of its complications, is the ultimate test for a supply chain. So what we can do is we can either eliminate bottlenecks by AI, or we can optimize our delivery capabilities as a supply chain, or we can reinvent software localization from the bottom up. So we should be looking at these two alternatives today. If you look at it, what can you do? I mean, the first two are already automated. String freeze, you don't need AI for this. You just need to have a rule. Every Tuesday, 5 o'clock, every Thursday, 5 o'clock, we are having a string freeze. Content packaging, for example, crowding has an excellent feature that is able to look into the code and try to extract context. This is where it's using LLM technology. Project setup, again, you need automation here. You don't need AI necessarily, even though you can have AI if you want. I can show you an example a little later. Sending it to the TMS, that's a very automatable topic. And then comes vendor assignment, translator availability, human translation. At the moment, I don't think there is any AI that can reasonably work with human vendors, simply because the underlying data is not very well exposed. There are ways to do that, but it's actually a hard topic because there is a lot to think about and a lot to consider here relating to capabilities, availability, cost. So it's a big optimization question. And you need to set up some kind of uh, preferences, which is something that you can actually, I'm not saying this is not automatable, but today I have never seen a fully automated, not full first come, first serve, or not a staggered release TMS type of assignment, but rather that I immediately know who I need to assign this project that I have not seen. You have ways of automating the translation selection, but that's still not something. I mean, human translation definitely can be speeded up. Uh, Review definitely can be automated, and you can have quality gates where you are saying that if this hits a certain quality gate, we don't do a human review. If it does not, you do. That is the linguistic review. I mean, revision cycles, you don't necessarily have to send it back. You can just do it so that the second translator fixes it on the spot to speed things up. Integration testing is something that, for example, DeepL is experimenting with something like RPA recently. I don't know when it's coming out because it's not yet out. Uh, and you are able to use that. I mean, that's kind of useful to impersonate, not like, looking at the HTMLs, but rather looking at the browser or looking at the desktop application. And release coordination is a matter of agreements. So there is like a lot that can be improved here and eliminated by AI as well. But I think the question is still there. Do we want to optimize our delivery capabilities as a supply chain, or do we just want to reinvent and create something new? Delivery capability optimization is giving us a chance because right now, let's face it, automated translation is definitely faster and cheaper. The only question is quality. Uh, Quality depends on the people who are consuming the product of translations, obviously what their expectations are. And quality can also be improved with proper uh, preparation. So even automated translation quality can be improved. So the question is whether we need to retain the human delivery, the human check of everything that goes through, or we need to look at a complete renewal of the process here. Let's look at alternative one. I'm going to talk mostly about the LSP's perspective because on the customer side, this is a problem that is like quite easily solvable. And I'm also going to bring in some be lazy examples here and explain what we are doing a bit because that was also part of what the briefing was about regarding here. Um, so one thing that's very interesting is that we were talking about different systems. We were talking about the translation management, which is where you've got the analysis, where you've got the links, where you've got information about the languages, obviously. You've got information about the linguists, where you've got information about deadlines very often, where you've got information about the translation resources to use, like translation memories, glossaries, and so on and so forth. So all the linguistic information is in this representation. And then there is the business management part where you are basically selecting the vendor. You are establishing how much are you charging for this project, how much the different vendors are charging you for this project if you've got vendors, uh, where you are identifying like who is available to work on this project right now and all this information. So this is all required in order to make a good decision about, like, let's say an automated decision about like whom can you assign. You need to be able to compare people who are charging minimum fees versus not charging minimum fees, but charging a higher fees, things like that, and make a decision on a one of basis, or maybe not. Maybe you've got agreements, and I'm actually very much in favor of having agreements relating to continuous localization. So you've got all of this information, and this is something that has been our big journey with Be Lazy. What information is actually needed for a project manager down the supply chain and up on the client side to get all of the decisions done right? So basically, how can I give the full representation of a translation job in order to support the automation of the process? So here's a bit of a discussion. What do you think about human project management? Some of you are project managers. Uh, when you are considering the client focus, because I always hear from project managers, but the client wants this, the client is like that. Do you think that the client focus of the human project management is because the clients are just not able to pin themselves down, or is it because it really is adding value in every project? Excuse me, I will drink a. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you want to speak, just raise a hand and I will unmute you. Okay, I can repeat the question. It's basically what's written there. So, is the client focus of the human project management really something uh, that is that you need to get more touch with them, or is it just a lack of agreements and specifications? Is it just that the client does not take the time to brief everything? That's why you need to be client focused in order to gather information that was not shared by the client? Or is it something in project management that is like really, really always necessary? I think you can see the answers. So Valerie was working on the client side and she knew that she needed to have all the details together before sending projects. Then you basically are saying that you just need people to ask back if you forgot something. Cool. Thanks. If anybody else wants it, yeah. Remy, it's interesting. It's both. So projects and technologies evolve, so requirements and expectations change and evolve. So client vendor relationships need to evolve too. I mean, there is truth in this, definitely. Uh, I guess that technologies are becoming like more widely used. Uh, I think from a project management perspective, technologies didn't change so much in the last 10, 15 years. Um, but on the other hand, like how customers are involved in it did change. And if you can share any good practices for, you know, customer management, like some stories, I think that this is an excellent uh, time to do that. Because what I'm always hearing is that in many cases, there is an issue with the customer understanding the vendor. And I don't know if it's the clarity of the communication, but there is also an issue with the vendor understanding the customer. So I'm not saying it's one-sided. But I don't know if it's a communication question or it is like a hierarchy issue. But I see that uh, like we've got some customers who come to us to talk to their customers uh, because we understand each other in an easier way. And I think that's because it's coming from a technology perspective, from a process perspective only. But I've seen this several times in my life that it's like when the customer and the vendor is trying to agree, they kind of don't understand the underlying principle, the underlying topics here. Anyway, shall we continue? Let's go. So what we are looking at is optimizing the delivery capabilities. And we are going to look from the LSP's perspective. But before we look from the LSP's perspective, let me put this image on. So this is not necessarily the LSP's perspective. This is still a general perspective of how systems can be integrated in any one company. Uh, I don't know if you've seen anything like this. I mean, here, actually, I didn't make a specific detour to the code repositories, but code repositories are also part of the content management systems, uh, and very similar to the web content management systems, where a subset of this is the dynamic content system. So, like, there are situations where, for a support ticket, obviously you would only use machine translation. You would never use a human translation. But how it is executed is exactly the same. It's like even a machine translation there needs to have a source language, a target language, needs to have, well, not a deadline as much, but needs to have some specifications about the content. Uh, and this is the same thing that a person needs. Maybe a person needs more, or maybe human translators need a bit more. But if you, for example, are using LLMs need as much as humans, I believe. Um, so you've got the systems for the web content management. I don't know if you've worked with any of these. I mean, I put WordPress up, which is probably the most well-known one. But these are basically generating little snippets of information, and little snippets of information are coming from Zendesk as well, be it knowledge base articles or be it other articles. And then you've got some systems like Jira, which is where a lot of companies are requesting their translations from. Other companies are actually using Jira for tracking the translation jobs. So it can be both here and it can be under business management system as well, if you like, even though here it's only on the task management system side. Then there are companies that have translation requests coming from, let's say, SharePoint. So online file repositories where basically the file is stored somewhere and needs to be picked up and translated. And then you've got some of the solutions, like most companies go for a translation management system. And here we put Crowd in first because that is the one that has the most integrations. I think everybody is lost with the number of Crowd integrations. They have like 600 or something. But probably of different levels. But you've got all the other systems, and they've got integrations to the web content management systems. They've got integrations to the online file repositories. For example, RWS's Trados Enterprise offers to every user direct links to online file repositories. But it has just a certain number of integrations. So every translation management system has somewhat different integrations of somewhat different levels. And it's not the only thing that integrates software. So if you are working, for example, with Optimizely or with Contentful, Content Stack, you might also look at, for example, iLangL, which is a CMS middleware. It is kind of abstracting away the problem of web content translation by offering some capabilities, such as, for example, plugins into those systems that other systems like Crowdin are not offering the same way. So there may be a benefit in how you are ordering from within, let's say, Optimizely or from within Sitecore, how you are ordering a project. And then it can either create a project in Phrase or MemoQ. I think that those are the supported one. Or it can create a project in BeLazy, which is another supported system. And basically, you are coming from, let's say, Optimizely through iLangL to BeLazy. Or you can go from Optimizely through iLangL to Phrase. Or you can go from, I don't know, from WordPress, you can go direct to Phrase. From Google Drive, you can go direct to XTM. And if you are working with something like Jira and you are receiving the jobs there, orchestrators are the ones that are having a lot of connectors to these kind of systems readily made. So like make.com, which is what we use a lot, Snap logic, which is used by companies like Accolade, for example, N8N. I have seen a lot of people mention this 2 weeks ago at the Take-On conference in Germany. Zapier is known by everybody, but it's actually not very good for our industry, I would say. And then there is the specialist Blackbird.io, which is like relating very much to content translation. And basically, what you are looking at is like what are the different alternatives of connecting content so that it can go into a translation management system and it can go into a business management system as well. Uh, I mean, I've taken this because this is also like one of the more graphical descriptions of what we do. And basically, that's why Lazy is in the middle. But in one way or another, Lazy is quite in a special place because what we are doing is harmonizing very much the project intake, no matter what you want to use, and keeping links between the translation management systems and the business management systems to keep to get to an automated project management, which is based on rules or based on other automations. But let's have a look here, what's happening with the different levels. So we talked about the supply chain. And this is what happens when the MLV is responsible for the technology stack. And I mean, they may or may not have be lazy here. That's not really the question. But one thing is going to be interesting here, which is the location of the different tools. So what you see is that the web content, I mean, website, every company has. It's not something outsourced, ever. Support systems, every company has that is working with support. File repositories, they do have. Task management systems, Jira, Asana, whatever, they have their own. They may say in a task management system to the MLV that you can work on this web content, for example, or upload the translatable files there. They may use a client portal as well, customer portal, which is something that you can see under the MLV topic. And basically, the MLV's goal is to provide continuity in this process for their clients, to provide technology. So just the same way as we talked about in the previous, so the actual descriptions here are pretty much the same, with one exception that email is added here. As a matter of fact, one of the things that many of the BeLazy customers are using is the email assistant, which is allowing you to connect to a Microsoft account and then create project directly in their business management systems or in BeLazy using information and the attachment from the email. Basically, you are having all of these different systems in the MLV stack. And then you've got some business management system. You can call it ERP, you can call it CRM. Some people call it CRM. You can call it a project management system. There are many ways of calling it. But after all translation companies have something like this. I've never seen one that did not. And the majority have one of these. There may be exceptions when you've got like a hugely big customer and then you are keeping two. But for the sanity of the day-to-day work, you have a business management system. A business management system can be a Google or an Excel sheet. So just don't always think about plunets and XTRFs and complicated things. Sometimes you just need to have a tracker sheet. That's already a business management system. But if you are using one of those official ones or commercial ones, then you've got a vendor portal. And this is how the single language vendor is connecting to you. But it's connecting also to the translation management system. On this level, usually the rest, like customer portals and email may be interesting, but like CMS middleware and things like that don't play a role anymore because the XLIF, if you like, or the bilingual translatable document is already there. It's already was created on the MLV level. And then the SLV may work in the translation management system of the MLV, or it may extract the translatable and use an integrated CAT tool for faster or better processing. And usually their business management system needs to also store information about the same project, client, PO number, deadline, languages, project name, project link, and so on and so forth. And then this is also going down to the translator. MLV and SLV acronyms, thank you very much for stopping me. It's something here. Multilingual vendor, MLV is multilingual vendor, so it's the large LSP that is managing projects across multiple languages. There are some clients that work with one. There are some clients that work with a few, usually not a lot. Or single language vendor, which is not always single language. It can be 2 languages, 4 languages, but it's a limited number of languages. And there are some clients like SAP or Oracle that are working directly with single language vendors, but the majority of large buyers are working with multilingual vendors. Going back here. So the translator is actually working in their CAT tool and taking the job from the vendor portal of the SLV. Or the translator may also work in the translation management system. Let's continue. This is when the enterprise takes ownership. Do we do breaks here? I'm sorry, I didn't know. Please, if you would like to have a break, just let me know. Okay, let's do 5 minutes then. So break time is 5:02 here in Spain. 5:08 we meet. Okay, 5:08. And then we go another 52 minutes. The session is being recorded. All right. I hope you have refreshed yourselves. And I had a nice juice. I hope you also had a chance. Sorry, I'm not showing camera. You can see me, right? So let's continue with today's course. Uh, so this is the setup where the enterprise is owning all, building their own technology stack. So this is the second setup, where basically the enterprise is responsible for connecting everything and offering the jobs from one system or a few systems. In this case, it is the translation management system that is usually gathering all of the information available. So you can connect the translation management systems with various systems here, either directly through their integrations, or you can even use various translation management systems for their different integrations and just get like a single view over Belazy here. So the idea here is that different connections are easy and hard in different translation management systems. Another idea here is that companies sometimes change their systems. And the problem is that if you have integrated everything, then changing your system is like really, really hard. So what Belazy offers to the enterprises is basically this flexibility that we offer a very simple connection layer, which allows you to create translation projects from various sources in a very simple way. And this is something I would like to show you with AI in a bit. And then basically that can go into translation management systems and then can go into business management systems. So the rest of the workflow is automatically handled. Okay. So, what are the steps of a continuous localization project for enterprises? And first of all, the content comes in, then the content is enriched, which means that you are looking for context. You are adding metadata, and you are making sure that whatever you do with the content is actually uh, fulfilling the promises you made to your vendor that you are adding this information. This is, for example, one area where AI is being successfully used, uh, the metadata tagging, because it's relatively easy to get, for example, a specialization of a text. Sometimes metadata is coming from the systems you connect. So, for example, it's a very useful thing to know if something is coming from your uh, web content management system, or if it's coming from your e-commerce system or your product information management system. Very, very useful. It can help you process the text better. Uh, then the content is prepared as a project, and the project is launched, and then black box until the delivery is received, checked, implemented, and tested. But what you see is that what an enterprise sees is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot happening under that. And all of that process and the quality of that process, the quality of the vendor selection, the quality of quality assurance, uh, of transmitting, for example, the instructions through that chain is very important to the final quality. But this remains hidden to most of the buyers. And what's the issue here? We're talking here about like very complicated uh, sets of players. And if you got two sentences to translate into 50 languages, then you are already involving probably over 180 people in this. Or maybe not 100, 150. If you just take 50 languages, there's a translator, there is a reviewer, that's already 100. If for all the 50 languages there is a separate project manager, That's another 50. And the MLVs also have a project manager. But what you see is that the MLVs may have like 3 people involved, whereas the rest of the supply chain is much, much, much bigger. They are working in different uh, systems as well, storing their translators there, storing their project details. And it's kind of even if inevitable if you're working with 150 people that some of the instructions don't get copied, something gets wrongly copied over. So this is actually creating also a quality issue. And here is something to think about. I like to think about this. Why is continuous localization slow? I mean, continuous localization depends very much on project management. Translators, sometimes some of them are night owls, some of them are early birds, some of them like to work on weekends, some of them prefer to take time off whenever they want. So the what happens is that it's the project managers that are working the normal business hours. And as it happens, a lot of the continuous localization starts on the west coast of the United States, which is not an easy one for Europe either, but still easier than for example, for Asia. So what you see here is that the UTC time is on top. Sorry, UTC time midnight to midnight. These bars are going. And basically what you see is that if everybody works 9 to 5 in their own time zone, how much overlap is there between the different times? So this is actually something that you can see that with Tokyo, for example, there's a bottleneck of 23 hours. So what happens is that um, simply if you are changing or sending instructions or requesting a deadline change, that happens in a day. You are answering, that happens in another day. So having like everything very well set up once makes a lot of sense. Because otherwise, this is the very reason. I was thinking a lot about this, but I cannot see any other reason. This is the very reason why there are 48-hour continuous localization projects, because it still runs through project managers who have office hours. And don't ask me why. I've seen a lot of people working on different shifts, but project managers don't normally do that. And this is uh, the issue, which has to do only with time. So you might ask, like, what are the things that should never ever happen in continuous localization? And there are a couple of things there, like content updates. I mean, continuous localization is usually very much related to what we call microtransactions. Uh, in most companies, in a couple of days, you don't create like an awful lot of content to translate. I'm not talking about the largest companies where they have programs, but I'm talking about the smaller companies. And the larger companies actually have programs where it's also like a manageable amount of updates or text. So what happens is that content updates, while it was very normal and it's kind of like the modus operandi for something like legal translations, or when you are, for example, having to translate a request for proposal where there is a deadline and you need to pass it and people are working while you are translating. Content updates are very normal in that case. But in the case of 5 sentences, probably there should not be content update. What you should do is like basically take back the translations and then send it out again if it's wrong with a short, if you had to update something on the source side, if it's a short translation. I mean, it is extra cost, I know that, but if you are disciplined enough as a customer, then you can prevent these kind of last minute changes because we're talking about very short times. We are just talking like the content changes, if it's this very short time, are usually because somebody just didn't take the time to do the content review on time. Um, so what I think is, if in the continuous localization, you are doing way more damage to the process uh, by, starting to bargain on the peanuts than if you are just owning your mistake. And it's normal that there is sometimes an update afterwards, but treat it as a separate project. The other topic in a continuous localization that should never happen is quoting. Why? Because it makes it non-continuous, simply. You have to have agreements on the details of the pricing and everything. And in continuous localization, you should never have quoting, simply. You should have agreements on the pricing with everyone, and there is no person involved with any quotes. So these are two things to take into account, because these are two things that can really ruin continuous localization, how it can be automated and how it works. So what's the minimum continuous localization project management? I mean, in most TMSs, vendor assignment is actually a compulsory step. In most TMSs, you have to have somebody assigned. It can be somewhat automatic or it can be manual. In most cases, it is manual on the lower levels, automatic on the higher levels. And the only single system that I've ever seen that had something like allow your translators to take projects to themselves was SmartLink, which I think is quite a clever functionality in the system, because it allows smaller LSPs to do localization projects in a continuous way without having to worry about doing a step before the translator can take a step. So it's saving time. Only a few TMSs support the continuity of the supply chain. So an LSP that is creating a group or somehow getting another LSP involved, only very few systems that I know of are supporting this directly. I mean, this is, I think, one of the reasons why systems like Phrase and XTM became popular with the enterprises, because they enable this. There is some limited support, for example, in MemoQ, but it's not full. Another thing which is an issue is that this often cannot be automated because linguist accounts often don't have APIs. So in many systems, you're not able to access this. So people are reverting to hacky solutions, such as setting up linguist accounts per language, like ENFR1, ENFR2, things like that, and then offering this to the actual vendors. The vendors are sharing passwords. I mean, this, on the other hand, is a security mess. So what is the minimum business management requirement? Because what we see here is that there is a minimum process management requirement that is assigning a vendor to every single project. And the minimum business management requirement is basically somehow getting a detailed word count with the vendor names. Again, some systems allow you to export, for example, at the end of the month, a detailed word count. So this kind of tracking is something that you don't necessarily need. Here I also have to give credit to SmartLink. Even though I'm not a super fan of SmartLink in every respect, but there are some solutions that are quite brilliant there. And basically, you can then pay them at the end of the month, which is something that many companies do. But in many systems, you can delete projects and there is no trace whatsoever, or an archived project is not anymore visible for the vendor. So in that case, the only thing you can do is that on the spot, you are actually keeping it, like, copy pasting something into an Excel or a business management system. So it's actually, even if you are trusting your customer and the customer is able to give you, like, this is what you worked on this month, the freelancers are separate people. So you need to keep track of all the projects because you need to pay the freelancers if you are using more than one. So what is the outcome of this is that the project management in continuous localization is unfortunately patchy, ad hoc, and not thought through. And this is something which is partly the fault of TMS providers. It is partly the fault of the enterprise customers who don't really look at what the supply chain is doing. But this is making things hard. I don't know how you feel about this. If you have any thoughts on it, please share. And this is why we at BeLazy came up with the concept of project management unification. So trying to do, regardless of the technology you are using, trying to keep some sanity and build automations around uh, the concept that you have to work with multiple systems. And everybody has to work with multiple systems. I mean, if you are just looking at that today, uh, how many LLMs are there? How many machine translation engines are there? Many. Then you've got the TMS. Then you've got the CMSs if you are on the enterprise side. Then got the business management systems if you're on the LSP side. Then you've got all of these like chat systems and file download systems and things like that, like Slack, Teams, whatsoever, where you may want to also keep track. Some people like to archive their files on Dropbox. So the idea is that you are never working with one system, but whether you are working with Dropbox, Box, or Tesseract, or what else is there for file storage, other systems, is the same thing. Whether you are working with one machine translation provider or another, from process perspective, it's the exact same thing. Whether you are working with one CMS or another, you can also abstract it away on the process perspective. So what we think is that there are some very convoluted ways in the industry how people are doing things because of the variety of the systems there, but it's possible to kind of tidy it up and unify project management steps and processes around use cases and system types rather than around individual solutions. So what is this project management unification? Project ingestion is actually the topic of getting a project into a system. And maybe what I should do is just stop here and show you something. Have you ever seen an MCP server? I mean, this is like the AI course, so probably you have. I haven't got a chance to review every single course. Anybody can share if have you seen an MCP server or have you worked with an MCP server before? You can say no. No, you have not. Okay. All right. Then let's have a look at the MCP because you are here for AI. You are not here for all of these slides, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little demo. Just ignore this. Can you see yeah, you can see my BeLazy screen, right? So here you got approvals pending. I mean, these are projects, and what you can look at is these connections. And we got these connections list, and I think it makes perfect sense to most of you. What's the structure here that you take a project from somewhere, you can quote it, you can process it. This is when you are like working on it and you are going to be delivering it. And this is when it's delivered already and you want to see like, what was delivered in the last 7 days or 24 hours and who delivered late and who did not. And then you got all these different connections. And here I've got some so-called workspaces. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my friend Claude. I'm sorry, I will not say my friend because it can complicate things a lot. And I have a prompt here, which you can probably see. Create a new translation project from Kazakh into Spanish and English. It's Kazakh because I have absolutely no clue about Kazakh. With a Word file of 15 words, with a deadline of the 4th of December 2025 and a price of 15 euros. Fair enough. Let's run. It's analyzing the information. I actually forgot to tell you that you should do it in Be Lazy. Oh, apparently it knows. So look, let me start. List workspaces. It is listing, you see, PlueNet Connect, email handling, and others. If you look here, PlueNet Connect, email handling, it has access to my system. Now it's creating a simple Word document. Yes, I can zoom in, maybe even more. It's okay, Julia? All right. So now it's uploading this file to a Be Lazy workspace. I hope it will work. This might take a little while because the Word document is a little longer and it needs to actually include the file content. And then it's going to create a translation opportunity. I actually only tried this before with text files. So this is the first time that I'm trying it with a generated Word file. Let's see how big was this Word file. Oof. Okay, a Word file is not short. This might take a while because it's now adding all of this character by character. And it's not really shiny fast. So maybe in the meantime, what I can do is do another try. And then when it's done, it's done. So here I'm going to do, tell me a language. Um, let's say Irish into Spanish and English. Uh, create a new translation project from Irish into Spanish and English with a text file of 15 words. I will show you how this is done. I also don't speak a word of Irish. Maybe this will be faster because uploading a text file is much easier, definitely. You see, it's taking a little different approach because it's first creating the text file and then listing the available workspaces. Any Irish speakers here? So it's already telling me it's going to use the email handling workspace. I mean, look here, email handling number of pending approvals is 0, right? So it's uploading the file now. This is definitely much shorter. Ayo, if you want to speak, I can unmute you. You raise the hand. I don't know where to allow to talk. Yeah, please feel free to talk. It's been uploaded. Now it's getting the languages. the language codes. So it knows which is Irish and Spanish. It would not be necessary actually in Be Lazy, but it is doing so. So I'm okay with that. Now they have the information they need. So it's converting the date to a millisecond unique timestamp. Unix timestamp is basically another way of expressing date. And that's what we are using on the API. So have a look here. It's generating a description, and I think you will understand most of these descriptions. So you see it's saying name, source language, target languages in an array, Spanish, English, deadline expressed in a different form, total price 15, currency euro, unit is word, workflow is translation, specialization is general. The file tag is just the uploaded file from earlier. And in the pricing item, you have one target language, which is Spanish, with 15 words. Weighted quantity is also 15 words here. You wouldn't need to set this up necessarily. Unit price is 0.5. And the analysis is like the rate type is standard, which is a bit weird. It would be like, new words or something like that. But basically, it's adding something like this. This looks a little weird. It doesn't always get it perfect, but then it is improving if it doesn't get it right. Oh, but it's got the Be Lazy feedback. Look. So what happened? We've got a project. And while it's working, I can actually show you that the number of pending approvals became 1. So under approvals pending, I've got an Irish to Spanish and English translation. I see one issue though. It did not upload the file for some reason. It usually gets it right. I could even tell it like accept uh, I mean, the file ID is interesting because we can have a look here. It's like, did you upload the file? And then it's going to analyze it and see what happened. Now, if I only knew where that disappeared, you could see that it just disappeared. Anyways, then accept the project. Let's see how it responds. Look, I got some red flags here because I did not have the Irish language mapped. So I'm just going to map it to Irish in my Opa. Uh, Gaelic, maybe. Gaelic, yeah. Okay. So it's called Gaelic. It's not called Irish here. What you see is that I was actually allowing the project creation from the AI interface. So this is a technology that is called, we can have a look in Plunet in a second. I just need to log in. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but basically it is storing the details of a project. I need to go here because it doesn't take me directly there. Update search, and it was the last one. Look, Irish to Spanish and English translation. And basically it's here. The deadline is here. There is an area of expertise. You see the two languages were added. You see that there was like 15 words of translation. There is a file manager here. And as a matter of fact, it actually saved this Irish text here. So it worked. It was actually available. Let me check this Irish text here. And came on the other screen I have. Look, it's here. So I just downloaded from Plunet the text that was made available here. You can compare it because if you are like me, you will find it hard to read. Yeah, so that's it. And basically, I used this to create a project in Plunet, but I could have used it to create a project in Phrase or MemoQ or in other systems as well. And now let's have a look at what is this doing. So one thing, the only trick that I have here is that in my, excuse me for having this in Spanish, in my system, I've got connectors, which is like by default, it's offering these connectors. And I added a belazy connector, which you will actually be surprised to see I built in Lovable. Lovable is an LLM-based like software development tool, which allows you to do very quick things. And basically, you need to prompt it, and it's able to do quite a lot. So it's a bit slow to load sometimes and to understand that I am the user. Yeah, here you go. So it is the so-called belazy companion. So this is an MCP server, which is actually something that allows you to expose APIs or expose functionality of different software through APIs in a human readable way. So what's the difference here? I mean, obviously we are talking to an LLM. An LLM is language model. It is thinking in languages. It's not thinking as much in code or API. A REST API is usually very, very like atomic. And basically you are able to do anything you want, but like you need to always refer back to codes. And this is something that's not so great. For example, here what you see is that one of the options is upload file to workspace. In belazy itself, uploading files is two steps. First, you upload the file, and then you assign that file ID to the workspace. This is very much in line with the REST API's approach. But for a human, I mean, you upload the file to add it to the workspace, it's one thing. So here I was combining the two, and it actually built something like this. And it also allows me to test things. So I can also do some other things. If I go back here and have the conversation going on, and I'm going to answer all the other topics as well, then I can also ask the system is, can you share the structure of the Plunet project? Oh, for some reason, it is actually not looking at the right project. So I'm just going to stop it and say like, look at project this. I could also refer back to other things as well, to the name of the project. It would know that, but sometimes it doesn't get it perfectly right. So it is getting the project, which is much less information than before. For some reason, it didn't work now. Yesterday, it still did. Uh, but I just wanted to show you the capabilities. Regarding this, so this is called MCP. And if you look at MCP, uh, it's a model context protocol, which is implemented with ChatGPT as well, and with Claude as well, and with other systems as well. So what you see here is an MCP server, and this is what we were implementing here. MCP was invented by Anthropic, but it was taken over by OpenAI as well. So ChatGPT, MCP. I don't have a ChatGPT paid uh, subscription, so I'm not able to show you that. But what you see here is that this is something that you can add the same way. Yeah. So this is MCP. MCP allows you uh, to include your systems in the chat environment of different large language models so that they can interact with the data from your systems. There are like many different tools out there, from Slack and Notion towards everything else. These are installable, but if you've got a decent REST API, then building an MCP is not a big deal. I just want to tell that I am not a developer. You could see that I'm an economist and a translator, and I was using only prompting in order to build this tool. So this was not reviewed by my colleagues so far. But I thought that if this is like an AI uh, masterclass, then it's a good idea to talk about MCP, because I feel that MCP can be something like a chat interface in the future. And Belazy is not only able to work with the chat interface. It's got, for example, this is another thing that I built with Lovable, which is an AI tool. Uh, Basically, you're able to use a form and just create the projects the same way in Belazy itself. So I can create, like, I don't know, uh, text to translate, and then I'm adding my own email, and then I'm selecting that it's an I. I can't select Irish, sorry. Uh, and then Spanish and French, things like that. Pick a date, and then I need to upload some files. 1 second. It's always hard to find a file that I need to upload. Sorry about that. I found one. And then this is where it becomes interesting that, you can add custom metadata fields like product line, uh, be lazy, uh, partner. Then you can add things like billing center, things like that. And based on this, you are creating a, sorry, I need to be logged on. I did not foresee this now. Uh, Let me find the login and then let me log on here. Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, this was forgotten, but as you see, this was also like fully built with prompting. So uh, putting my email address, I'm putting my source language, and then it goes into Spanish and French, let's say, till the 28th. Let me stop sharing my screen so that I'm not giving you anything really. I just need to find document again. Of course, when you're trying to find it quickly, you can't. Anyways, I found another one. So I'm adding this. And yeah, and you can have like area, ITSec, for example, translate it. So I create the translation order. And just the same way as before, if I go into Be Lazy, I've got the pentest report here. And this one does not have a volume because I didn't create any. So I'm creating a translation management system project. Sorry, the language codes were wrongly set up for my TMS. This is a typical demo effect, but basically if it were like a three language code, which I can just come back here and I can say that for setting up, use a three language, uh, sorry, for, for the opportunity creation, uh, for representing source and target languages, always use the three-letter language code. And then it's fixing my code on the fly. And what you're able to see is how it is like responding. There is a code parser. I don't know if you actually looked at like wipe coding earlier. Zooming in. Yes, I'll zoom in. Okay, it's, I think, probably a little bit too much even. So it's editing these files. This is a TypeScript application that is working on the basis of this open source technology called Supabase, which is actually quite a brilliant technology because it has all the authentication providers of Microsoft and everything. So if you're building something for your clients, then this is like really, really fast. And you can deploy it. So you can actually push it to GitHub and deploy it from there. So it was updated. And now if I go back and to the actual preview, then let's call it second attempt. And let's have English from English into Spanish and French. now we go here, and I'm going to upload a file again. Which was called Be Lazy Pen Test Report 2025. I could add more files, so this is not an issue. And then just again, one more like, topic, security, something like that. And then create. Oh no, I need to log in again, sorry. And now redo the whole thing. But I'm getting faster now. English into French and Spanish. And then you can pick a date. And I'm adding like topic security. And we just need to add the file here. For that I'm pausing. File has been added now. And create the translation order. Now it was created just like before. And what I see is that the language codes are longer. You see? And now the MemoQ project was actually created. I'll give it a few seconds to import the files before I log in. This would also work with Phrase and other tools. Documents are not yet imported. It is a bigger document, so it might take a while. But what you can see here is that it actually was attempted to be imported in 2 languages. And in MemoQ's interesting way, it's extracting the embedded Excel worksheet as well, it seems. And yes, here we are. So it's like you've got 5 segments in the embedded worksheet. And off you go. And the project is fully done based on metadata. So this is also reasonably quick. If you want, tomorrow we can have a look at how you configure these automations in order to make sure that things are happening automatically, and how you can actually deploy AI, machine translation, quality estimation, automated post-editing, and other things on any kind of TMS that is supporting the XLIF workflow. So that would be the topic for tomorrow. And then let me just quickly check your questions, because there were a few, I think. And I may not have answered all of them. Okay, so how come Claude knows about BeLazy? Are you within a specific Claude project? This I answered that it's MCP, and I added an MCP connector. Will there be integrations for ChatGPT 2? MCP is supporting ChatGPT. What are the security risks to consider when using MCPs? That's a very, very good question. I mean, basically, MCPs are kind of connecting, as far as I know, are connecting to the REST APIs of different systems. So the security risks are 2. One is that whatever your API is able to allow, this is, for example, when I showed the pen test report, our penetration testing was making sure that customers are not able to access through the APIs other people's data and things like that, or through the user interface either, for that sake. But there's another security risk, which is sharing the data that it is generating with an LLM. I mean, that security risk is the exact same thing as if you were like typing in all the details. There is no other risk here. How does BeLazy position itself versus Blackbird? Blackbird is a process automation tool, I feel, and BeLazy is more like a project management unification tool. So from our perspective, what we do is abstracting away use cases. Blackbird is excellent, I think, in point to point, like single integrations when you are doing something with which is very related to the different systems APIs. What we are doing is that we are probably doing less integrations, but what we are doing is we are abstracting away on the one hand. And the other thing that you might need to know or need to see is in the presentation, I talked about the fact that APIs are not generally available for every user role. Because of this, how we build our TMS APIs is that very often we are not using the official APIs. But what we are using is the internal APIs that are the communication tools when you're in a browser and you are communicating with the server from your browser interface. So we are impersonating people. And that is, I think, one very big thing because it offers, on the one hand, a complete UI feature parity, because what is possible in the UI is possible with the integration. And on the other hand, it's also enabling us to work with APIs that are either like impossible to get. For example, MemoQ's API gives you admin access, no matter what. If your customer is using MemoQ, they are not going to give you the API. They are going to use it themselves, but they are not going to give you an API. Or in the case of XTM, for example, where getting to the customer's API is not easy. Or, for example, right now we are working on a Trados Enterprise integration. In Trados Enterprise, you can get API from your customer, but it's a bit tedious to set up. And what we said is like, it doesn't take us like so much more to simply just say that we are just going to use your normal login. And basically, no matter what the customer says, you should be able to have the same access to information because it's not a security issue. If you have on the user interface access to all the information, why wouldn't you have it on an automation level? There is no reason to say that there is any breach here. So this is basically what we are doing uh, differently, and we've got a very strong topic which is related to the translation management to the business management part. So we have this kind of costing and availability and repeatable processes, bundling of the projects. Those are very strong in Be Lazy. I hope I answered your question. And I also believe that we are